This is manuscript illuminating, and these three were just masters at the art of small paint brushes, making intense designs. And it's not obviously, Natalie and others, about the church. There's no like Virgin Mary here, no Jesus, no stigmata, no saints. It's just what we call a genre scene. It's a scene from everyday life. So that's what the Lindbergh brothers are painting here, even though it's in a book of prayers. So, Sister Wendy, let's hear what you got to say. Sorry.
Turrets, battlements.
I just realized that the Zoom wasn't going and I thought I could fix it. All right, so she said turrets.
A castle. We've come to the Middle Ages and the time of chivalry. Now the world is becoming smaller. Artists are traveling around and meeting one another. And we're beginning to have what's called, rather pompously, an international style. Very rich hours of the Duke of Berry, a suitably luxurious castle from the sunniest Middle Ages ever painted. Gentry play, happy peasants toil. It's the rich man's view. That's what the Duke of Berry was. After 1,000 years, non-religious themes in art have reappeared, and the Limburg brothers paint the Duke's property, castles, lands, and peasants to liven up his prayer. The only castle painted by the Limburgs which survives today is Fiero in the Loire Valley. What do we see when we look at this enchanting picture? Well, what the Duke of Berry saw was a page on the most splendid manuscript ever owned by a royal prince. And one can imagine him in a broad iron church looking at these magnificent pictures. This is the month of August on the calendar at the beginning of the book. And it's a miraculous picture because it gives the Duke just what he wants. There's the castle, one of his 17 castles, all curly and gleaming in the light. And here are the courtiers on their splendid horses, perhaps the Duke himself on that white horse, out walking in all the glory of their attire. Because the Limburgs are great artists, they don't just give the Duke what he wants. They give what they actually saw. And they saw those fields and the river and the peasants swimming, motherless, unembarrassed, frolicking in the water. So in front, the courtiers, those living apparently the good life. This is August, remember, very hot. They're clothed to the neck in rich, tight clothes. I mean, look at the women's waists. They're on these horses following a game, right talking, but it's the rules of the game. And even those sort of canoodling in the back, there are rules for exchanging love looks. So it's a very constricted life, a life being looked at, whereas the peasants, they're free. They're happy, which is better off for them those must be asking. Now it's this double level I find so marvelous, and all the little birds do. And my favorite painting, I think, is this one. Gertrude. Because at first you can see it's comic. Here is the lady of the house, the peasant lady, warming her underpants before the fire. modestly averting her gaze from the men of the house, who are warming their lack of underpants before the fire. And is this ability truly to look without fixed ideas of what is fitting that makes a painting?
Hmm. Oh, I wasn't tired. Well, if I was tired, I'd be sleeping now. But that idea that two levels, they show you the two levels what the Limburg brothers wanted. There are 17 castles, but also on deeper level, like asking questions like who is truly free, the peasants or the courtiers, those apparently living the good life. And then that double level of what's going on in the February scene. Alex, you had a hand up.
So she admired the beauty that it shows not only what's there, but also things going on beneath the surface. Is that?
Well, yeah, there's another, like, so the question of freedom, who is really free? That's not something an artist can look at and say, oh, I'm going to paint that because that's the value of freedom. But when you paint what you actually see, she says, without fixed ideas of what is fitting or proper, that allows space for those other issues to come out. So she's just she's saying that the Limburg brothers are just looking, and they're not going to censor themselves. How many of you have ever like had like a diary or a poem book, and maybe you don't want your parents to find it because like there's some thoughts that you might think are not fitting for someone who's proper, and certainly you wouldn't want your parents to see it. That's going to censor you, don't you? You're like, yeah, me. I don't need to know who. I'm just saying, if you write like that and like, I'm going to hold this back because someone might see it, then you have like the fixed idea of what is right and proper, and that might stop you from seeing something important. And when you're an artist being hired by a rich person, all the more pressure to just give them exactly what they want and don't take any chances. But great artists take chances. Michelangelo took chances, as we'll see in a few weeks. And the Limburg brothers took chances too. And guess what? Joan of Arc, a nice segue. She took chances. Who did she fight for, Gracie? The French is correct. They call her the Maid of Orleans. And she went to the king and said, we're losing these wars against the English, and God's speaking to me. I hear his voice, and I think you should allow me to lead the army. How crazy would that be in the early 1400s for some king to turn over command to some young girl who's dressed like a boy to get in to see him? She like puts on the outfit so he doesn't really know she's a girl at first. But then he's like, well, they're so Christian that story persuaded him. All right, give it a try. We'll try anything now. What have I got to lose? So she wins a series of successful battles against the English, but then she is captured and burned at the stake. She later became a national heroine of France, and she is pictured here on her white horse. But you should know that she heard voices. This is not some like argument. She didn't go to West Point and study military strategy. Happy Veterans Day, by the way, for those who are veterans today. Thank you. She didn't study it. She just heard God's voice. So this is called the 100 Years' War that she was embattled in. Also, today's Armistice Day. On the end, this is when the armistice was signed for World War I. It used to be a holiday, and so World War One ended at this time. But this war was not World War One. It was the 100 Years' War, but it lasted more than 100 years. So that's a misnomer. And it wasn't really a war. It was a series of wars that broke out over that 100-year plus time period. And Britain and France, we've already seen the Norman invasion, William the Conqueror, 1066. And we've seen the history of some of these battles between the French and the English. The wars were fought, and you can see in these pictures, like medieval art tends to be very flattened. And when they want to show something as behind, it usually goes up, like in the picture. Like if you look here, like what's behind the woman averting her gaze from the men's lack of underpants. What's going on behind here is there, but it's like up in the picture. They don't have the mathematical diagonals that they're later going to have to give a convincing sense of depth in medieval pictures. But when you look at these flattened pictures, you can look at the armaments that they have. So I see some cannons, longbows, not unlike what's under my bed at home, in case an intruder comes in. And you also see that their armor is a certain way. This is plate mail armor, probably very rigid, but it would be useless to have lesser than this against gunpowder. So she was handed over to the English and burned at the stake, 1431. France eventually expelled England from France in 1453. Here are some weapons that came out during this 100 Years' War. War is a great chance to innovate your weapons, and that's a scary thing, like about adversaries like Iran and things getting involved in wars, because then they can test their weapons, test their drones, test their military capabilities. We see the longbow, talked about that, gunpowder, the foot soldier, and then we see the defensive tactics respond accordingly. If someone's got gunpowder, you don't build a wooden fence to keep them out. You're going to need something stronger. So here are the plate mail covering up these soldiers. And again, the perspective here is kind of funny. When you look at that ladder, like the guy's like almost 75% of the size of that ladder, but it conveys nevertheless the close proximity of warfare, even though there's gunpowder at this time. Now, what made me think of that little segment, and you're probably thinking of it too, especially when I talk about Iranian drones. Like when you have gunpowder and now like laser guided missiles, drones, we're getting farther and farther from the interpersonal element of combat. When you were in 6th grade, maybe you had a fist fight with someone down the street, hopefully not. But that's a very, dare I use the word, intimate form of battle, like it's face to face. But here we got drones. These guys are sitting in like sheds in Las Vegas or Nevada, somewhere in Nevada, and they go home at 5 and have dinner with their family, and then they go back and they operate the drones the next day. It's a very lack of interpersonal communication. I'm not sure that affects how many people actually die in wars, but it would seem to me like if you depersonalize it too much, you start seeing it more like a video game, like Call of Duty, and less like actual ending of a biological life. Just a thought. Let's talk about the papacy. So this question is, how did the Avignon papacy and Great Schism contribute to the decline of the church? We have the rise of nation states during this time period, ever since the Magna Carta in 1215, rise of England, rise of France, rise of the Papal States. And except for the Papal States, where its churches stay together, you have this international desire of the church to like rule over everyone, at least spiritually, and collect money. But here, this is an embarrassing episode for the papacy that it never quite recovers from. First of all, Rome was a disaster, as our president-elect would say, in the 14th century. It was just a disaster. It was lots of poverty. It wasn't a clean city. Basic services weren't being provided. So a pope who has a good sense of like, I'm great. I should live somewhere better, was invited by the powerful French kings to move to Avignon, France. And so the Bishop of Rome, which gives the Pope their authority, on you, Peter, I shall build my church. And now they live in France. What does that do for the credibility of the papacy?
It harms their credibility because Rome was kind of around where the church had a centralized authority. So the fact that the head of the church was going somewhere else, it showed that they do not trust their own like capital of their own religion. Or something along those lines.
Yeah, all those things that maybe they don't trust the security of their own city. Their religious credibility is chipped away at because now they're not in Rome, and Rome gives them the power. And these French kings, it makes them look like they're in the back pocket of the leadership of France. Saint Louis was a French king, and in fact, one of the pictures up here is called the Siege of Saint Louis. Well, not that one. So they moved in this nice seaside town. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place. They don't want to leave. The Pope after Pope lives in Avignon, further eroding the trust in this institution. Finally, Gregory IX returned the papacy to Rome. This is an extra learning picture showing that this is going to be a triumphal return back to the city of Rome. And he's being guided by some saints up there. Then, after that, the Avignon papacy ends. There's up to three popes at one time. Clement VII is in France. Alexander V is in the Papal States in Rome. Oh, no, he's in Pisa. And then Urban VI is in Rome. Three claimants to the papacy. That would be like if Joe Biden, as they say on Saturday Night Live, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris were all claiming to be the one and only president at the same time. It's much worse if you're the Pope because there's only one Pope at a time. It's not like the Roman councils where there were two of them by definition, or senators where there's 100 by definition. One Pope, and now three are claiming to be it. There was the dispute between the one in France and the one in Rome, and then electors were like, well, neither of you guys are going to rule if you can't work this out. So they elected a third Pope. And then that third Pope wouldn't step down, and neither would the first two. That's called the Great Schism. And you might have heard the schism also about the Eastern and Western Church breaking up, but that's not the Great Schism. This is. So 14th century, what I'm trying to do is to show that the modern world is shaped by the rise of nation states, the decline of religious adherence to Christianity, specifically Catholicism, and some of it they walked into themselves. Indulgences and selling like time out of purgatory, that doesn't help a century later, does it?
So it's the modern world is related to the rise of how religious states fall and grow.
Well, part of the modern sensibility, if I asked most of you what's modern, you would say progress, science, self-reliance. You would say, like, as I said before, subjectivity, like the things that you think like is modern. It's not just like a modern pants. Like, although style, we use that word, like modern means of the day. If I say what's modern, part of what you mean is a separation of church and state. You know, those backward religions that don't practice your religion, that demand that everyone believe in that religion, that's not a very modern idea to you. So I'm saying that part of the modern sensibility must include the decline of the church. Because if people are following the church, then they're following ancient traditions rather than viewing some state of affairs as something that could be improved upon. You don't want to take the point too far, but decline of church helped set up the modern mindset. Another thing that sets up the movement from the Middle Ages into the next period is this terrible plague, the Black Death. There had been plagues before, but the Black Death wipes out, today Jake was saying, half of Europe. I think that's probably a high estimate, but certainly a third of Europe died, millions of people. So families gone, and it's going to take a long time to reproduce enough human beings to repopulate that earth. It does happen. We're up to 7.5 billion now, so things are going very well for human reproduction and for the planet. It's just really beautiful to watch. All right, so Black Death wipes out lots of people. The Black Death is actually a combination of 3 different plagues at the same time. You got the bubonic plague that everyone knows about. You get bit by a flea, you get a boo-boo. In about 5 to 7 days, you die. That's not that fun. And then the septicemic plague, which attacks the blood, and you die very quickly because it's in your blood. There's also the pneumonic plague, lungs, pneumonic plague. And remember, COVID came out. No one wants to talk about COVID anymore, but I try to talk about whenever I can. There was a fear at the beginning, like, how is this spread? And I guess the theory was that it's spread through you breathe in the air. And so then we had to keep 6 feet away from each other. And that was very good for communities. 6 feet away, so you don't breathe it in. That's like the Black Death, like the pneumonic plague would enter through the lungs. The bubonic plague would, where you'd be bit by a flea, although they didn't always know it at the time. They didn't have the science we do. So look at this sad painting. They're just burying hosts of caskets just to get them out of public view. The gravedigger, I can zoom in on him here. He looks quite sad and unhappy too, but I got him even there. And that's from Sherman Park last year. What's in the ground, kid? Officer, no, I'm a resident. All right, so Giovanni Boccaccio lived in Florence when the Black Death came. And he wrote the Decameron during this period. 1351 it comes out. He's working on it in the years before. In the intro to the Decameron, maybe you've read this in high school. It's often coupled with Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Chaucer. He writes of the plague. The calamity had instilled such horror into the hearts of men and women that brother abandoned brother. Right. Yeah. Brother abandoned brother. I mean, it's hard to believe, but it did happen. Uncles, sisters, and wives left their dear ones to perish. And what is more serious and almost incredible, parents avoided visiting or nursing their very own children as though they were not their own flesh. Who would you abandon if, let's say, COVID was like 40% death rate and not 2%? Would you abandon your spouses, your kids, grandma? Everyone thinks they wouldn't, but they were fearful. Nobody wants to die. Like, that's part of our mindset. And so great abandonments were happening. Yes.
Going along that, I think also the fact that how terrifying the results were and people suffering from them added to the fear as well.
Yeah, it's not that they just didn't want to die. They didn't want to experience that dying process. Lots of people are not afraid of death, they're just afraid of dying. Now Jesus, if I may quote him. Okay, yes, I got the okay, I can quote him. He said, "Our Father who art in heaven," like he's talking about one happy family. You're a family with everyone else, and God's the Father. Like that's a great spiritual ideal. Everyone is one family. But here, the nuclear family is being torn apart by fear and by the desire not to catch this ailment. So I ask, what would Innocent III think about how the Black Death foregrounded mortality? Like, you know what a foreground is of a picture. So the Black Death makes everyone think about death more. Do you think that Innocent III on the misery of the human condition would be so excited at this? In life, he fattened one man. In death, he fattens a multitude of worms. And then there was something about dung and vomit. Yeah, of course, he would like this because now we got memento mori. We remember we have to die, and that's a good thing because then we can turn to spiritual concerns. Woodcuts are coming out at this. This is like 3 decades after the Decameron by Boccaccio, and we have like skeletons like gleefully ushering people away. Knights, gentlemen, children. There's one of like a new married lady, like, congratulations on your marriage. And death is like taking her away, smiling. Now, you, CJ, you don't have your mug today with the skull on it. It would have been a good day to bring it. But that kind of sparkling mug that we all saw, because I think you held it up, is in the tradition of this macabre imagery of like death as in the Day of the Dead in Mexico, Halloween, like joking about death. Like that is one human response to it. And it goes back to here and even before. You just make comedy out of what is necessity. So here's a poem written by Francois Villon, who thinks of death as the great leveler. And as I read this, rich and poor, fools, sages, laymen, they all die. I thought of Steve Jobs, Apple, iPhone. Is he still living? No. As rich as he was, he could not stop it. That's the only rich person I know who's ever died. Carnegie is still doing great. Akhenaten, perfect. No, it's the great leveler. Like that, and talk about democracy and equality. Mortality is one of those things, unless we figure out the elixir to immortality and only the rich can afford it. That'll be an interesting time to live in. So there is Boccaccio outside of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and he was from Florence, and he writes, as I said, the Decameron, where in the intro he talks about people fearing and not nursing their family members. So once it gets out of the preface and into the actual story, we learn that it takes place over 10 days, hence the word Decameron. It means like 10 days. So some rich people have escaped the town to try to preserve their lives. So they go to this villa and they hang out. They have the money to not be in the city when the Black Death is ravaging it. And they exchange stories, 10 a day, over 10 days equals 100. And there are 7 women and 3 men. And they each get to be like king or queen for the day, picking out the theme of the storytelling. If we had that now, like there's a plague outside, go hang out in Osborne. Let's put 10 people in a room. If there's Wi-Fi, you're probably just going to be like, why make up stories? Let's just look up scores. There are no scores. This is serious, but here they tell stories and they make them up. Now, in this painting, I find 6 women and 3 men. I don't know where that 7th one is. All right. So 2 days or 3 days ago, I was listening to some post-election analysis just on this podcast. And one guy was saying America has not, in the political class has not taken stock of just what that plague, COVID-19, did for common people, especially the working class. The essential workers had to go to work while the laptop class got to sit at home and get their groceries delivered and such. And I was shocked, maybe not shocked, because it was a pretty smart point that the Decameron was referred to. So I want you to hear for yourself as he's making that point. Now, what does that have to do with the election? Well, maybe the working class is a little more fed up than was perceived before the election because of the continued suffering since the 2008 financial crisis, but now COVID also, where they didn't get much while the well-to-do were served while the others put themselves at risk. So in about a minute in, he's going to refer to the Decameron and you will feel smart.
Where I was going with this is that we had a class division in the United States, the likes of which I don't think we've really reckoned with, which is that everybody with means went inside to protect themselves and stay safe and healthy based on what they understood. And that was only possible because of tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people who were not allowed to stay inside, who delivered your groceries and worked in the Amazon warehouses and drove the trucks and drove the Ubers and did the work of the hands, and they got nothing. I mean, we all celebrated the first responders, but the American economy and American society were kept going by people who logically or theoretically were putting their lives at risk to support the lives of, it's like the Decameron. It's like Boccaccio's Decameron. The wealthy are staying in their villas and having debauched, debauching in their villas while the poor are dying in the streets.
It's like Boccaccio's Decameron. They're getting away from it all, while those without the means, they're not telling stories because they're contracting the Black Death. So one of the stories that's reprinted in our book is from day 6 into the Decameron. And this isn't in the book, like what day it is. You have to remember it. But remember I said that there's 10 days, 10 stories per day. So on day 6, the 7th story that's told is this tale of Philippa. And Philippa is a devout worshiper of Cupid. What is Cupid interested in? Doesn't he have arrows? Jaden. Yes. Yeah, he's the child of Venus. And he it is a Roman name. So he would hit you with an arrow, and then you would be in love with whoever you saw right after you got hit with the arrow. Oh, okay. So Cupid's interested in love, and Philippa's interested in love, but she's married, which usually you think in the modern world where you can pick your spouse, although we often do not pick perfectly. I say we like the human race. I hope you pick well. So she's interested in this Ronaldo, So one night she's surprised in her bedroom one night by her husband in the arm. Okay, Ronaldo is her husband in the arms of Lazarino. So Lazarino, that evokes the name Lazarus, who was raised from the dead by Jesus. Okay, so she's caught in the act. Now they're not in Texas, so you can't just kill. Yeah. So the husband takes her to court and says this wife of mine was an adulteress. Filippo defends herself twofold. She makes the first claim, which is the more important one, which is laws should be made equal for all and should be made with the consent of those whom they affect. So did the slaves who were in America during the Constitutional Convention, did they vote on the laws of the Constitution? No. So that violates this principle. Women, if women are going to be like sentenced to burn at the stake, every time I say that, it sounds tasty, but it's not tasty. It's a different kind of steak. If you're subject to laws, you should have the consent, and you should be involved in making those laws. You often hear that with the abortion debates, like men, white middle-aged men should not be making laws over women's bodies. Maybe that's a compelling argument to you, or maybe you think, well, women should be making laws over fetuses' body. Like, you can have that debate, but that isn't the centerpiece over who gets to make the laws and who do those laws affect. That's a powerful argument in the late medieval period here. Actually, this is more into the Renaissance by the 1400s. And then number two, simply ask my husband whether I've ever failed to yield myself to him entirely whenever he chose and as often as he pleased. Sounds like someone's reading some terrible, sordid, salacious novel. Basically, I had leftover love. And there was something beyond. What was I supposed to do? Throw it to the dogs, she says. So that's her defense. I had love to give, and I kept everything up for my husband. That's a pretty daring argument to make if the church is strong. If the church is like censoring things and punishing people, and you got Boccaccio writing stories like that, and they actually get more colorful as you read through the days, then you'd be afraid to write that. But that maybe shows that Florence is a free-thinking place. Popes don't have that much control, even in Italy at that time. And the world is modernizing. Women are starting to clamor for more rights. And it's becoming a more free society that people are free to do with those lives what they want. Just some thoughts to think about as you yourself read that short story that's reprinted in your book. So feminism is the idea that women should have equal rights to men. And there's different, waves of feminism in America. But back then, 14th century, the main push was that women were being educated differently than men, and their experiences were more like cropped. They didn't get to see the world, so they weren't learning as much. So it's really a push for education. Christine de Pizan is a feminist in that she wants women to be better educated, and then they will be better companions to all they come in contact with, better parents, they will be more interesting, they will be more moral. So she builds this allegorical city of ladies. La Cité de Dames, so the city of ladies of Christine de Pizan. And so she's talking to reason, rectitude, and justice. And they're telling her how to build this city and what to do. and it's expanding educational opportunities and expanding experiences. So they're building this metaphorical city on the right. I hope you're not thinking that they're building a wall at the southern border. And then just one more thing before the break. We'll talk about Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, unfinished at the time of his death. It was a frame story, kind of like Thousand and One Nights and like Boccaccio's Decameron, where there's like a story within a story. So the frame here is that pilgrims are going to visit the shrine of St. Thomas of Becket in Canterbury. So they're in London and they're waiting, they're assembling, and then they're going to go visit the shrine. He was the most popular saint in England at this time. He was canonized, which is to say he was made a saint just like a year or two after his death, because stories were going around, hundreds of stories that people who visited his grave site were cured of various diseases. So all these people from different social areas, social classes, are going to visit, and they're telling stories. So that's interesting in itself. Like, what do these different people from different classes, what do they tell each other? Well, for more on the cult of Becket, let's just drop in here and you can just see how important he was. Then we'll come back to the Canterbury Tales.
The brutal murder of Thomas Becket in 1170 shocked Europe. While Henry II protested his innocence, a tide of anger and grief followed, culminating in the emergence of a cult around the Archbishop. The cult centered on the belief that Becket's blood could cure a range of ailments. It started spontaneously at Canterbury, with the first miraculous cure in the city recorded on the 4th of January 1171. And within 6 months, reports of miracles were spreading far and wide. From leprosy to blindness to mental illness and driving out demons, Becket could cure it all. His blood was even said to help in the search for lost items. Such was the demand that Canterbury Cathedral opened its doors to pilgrims during Easter week in 1171, and again on Becket's birthday, the 21st of December the same year. As the popularity of Becket's cult continued to grow, the church decided to make it official, with the Pope making Becket a saint on the 21st of February 1173. On the 12th of July 1174, Henry II, plagued by rebellions, made a pilgrimage to Becket's tomb to atone for his sins. The king walked to the cathedral through the streets of Canterbury barefoot, allowing the monks to whip him. While Henry would continue to attempt to assert his authority over the church for the remainder of his reign, the strength of the popular reaction to Becket's murder forced him to approach this task much more carefully. Meanwhile, the monks at Canterbury had moved quickly to protect Becket's tomb with a stone box, pierced by 4 oval portholes through which pilgrims could look at and touch the shrine, and the appointment of guardians who also kept detailed records of the miracles attributed to St. Thomas. Benedict of Peterborough and William of Canterbury took on this role, and between them they recorded 703 miracles over a 10-year period. A method of distributing the blood to pilgrim in phials cast from tin or lead was also devised, and these were sold for a farthing and filled with the water of St. Thomas from a jug. The recipients wore the phial suspended from the neck as a recognisable badge. Becket's shrine remained hugely popular with pilgrims throughout the Middle Ages, providing the monks at Canterbury Cathedral with a considerable and steady stream of income. Pilgrimage was an important aspect of pre-Reformation religion, as illustrated in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales in the late 14th century. Until the emergence of the cult of St. George in the 15th century, Thomas Becket was generally regarded as England's patron saint. Although Becket was revered for some 4 centuries in England, and his tomb, upgraded by Archbishop Stephen Langton in July 1220, for a time rivaled that of St. James of Compostela in Spain as one of the most important pilgrimage destinations in Western Christendom.
So what was that last church you mentioned? Compostela? Yeah, that's the church in Spain where that had St. James that everyone was going to. So this is a big deal to make this pilgrimage that Chaucer's writing about 200 years after the saint's death. And you saw probably Becket with the sword through his head. That's how he was martyred. And the stories were that Henry, I think it was the second, was involved in that, but he claimed his innocence. So this is by William Blake, a Romantic era artist. The pilgrims going on their way to Canterbury to get to that shrine, to get to the tomb, and provides a literary cross-section of late medieval society. So, we don't have any, I think we just have a description of the different pilgrims in your book, but you don't have a reprint of one of those stories. But maybe you've read The Miller's Tale. That's pretty popular. The Wife of Bath's Tale. I have a rap album. No, not Frank Ocean. Is he a rapper? Frank Ocean. He's good. Yeah, more like R&B. I do have a rap album of someone rapping the Canterbury Tales, and it's actually pretty close to them. So if you're interested, I could send you a file on the down low, and you could listen to that and enjoy these stories. But they are very very interesting stories, especially The Wife of Bath's Tale. And yeah, so that's another frame tale, and now we have the three. So with that, let us now have our break. It's a little more than usual, but I think you're gonna have fun each step of the way. Otherwise, you'll be mad at me, and then there's no need to fill out the evaluation at the end of the term if that is the case. So I'll just get a read on the room and then bring it back when you guys are getting close here. We're going to listen to Guillaume Michaud in the background, a composer from the day, the Mass of Notre Dame.
This would be great for your status. I mean, this. I mean, look at this. I mean, the staff is really. I don't know. Black pig. The black pig has to be the saddest last. I mean, look at that. Seriously, it's
No, I picked him.
I'm just wondering, do you mean just in the picture or throughout the entire chapter?
Throughout the entire chapter.
So who is the science in the North? I mean, this is considered.
It could be a saint. It could be Jesus.
This picture, I don't think you said.
No, okay, fine. We're gonna do Jesus. We're doing the one. I'm doing my favorite.
To be honest, like both pictures, like the two show some mother grieving of their child or loved one singing. That seems to be always one of the saddest things I hear about. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
What would be better?
What about the angels?
I mean, I know why.
There's a lot of sadness.
Look at this man. He's just so devastated. I don't want that. Which one do you choose?
it's both kind of like a Same thing, like, one's also safer, but one's being, the other's being drowned out by a constant fear of death from everyone around them. Which gives more despair to the others.
Everyone gotta choose a sad picture. What makes you cry? What makes you absolutely tear up? What made you stop the first time you read this chapter?
Nothing.
Nothing. Well, that's depressing.
It's more like,
I hope you're. I hope you have a good life.
it's more like you see a bunch of like sad things and other kinds of things, kind of like get used to some things, so to speak.
Okay, well, to be fair, that's actually kind of scary more than it's sad. This honestly doesn't make me. I think the only one that makes me kind of sad is the Black Plague being affected death, because I can kind of imagine what it's like to go through that.
That makes sense.
And also, there's just so much devastation happening in there. Like, yes, Jesus is dead. Cool. There's a bunch of people that are dying too.
Right, some people were like, and I think if the fault of the people down here are respond like these are adults, these might be children.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm pretty sure anyone died. It didn't matter who it was. There wasn't. I'm pretty sure even babies died.
Yep.
So
So I think we're going to the people within the Black Death image because it shows the majority of death affecting everyone, as the Black Death does not discriminate between young, old class, or gender. Or age. And people having to carry their loved one, where they be children, parents, lover, friends.
And it came to the same, you're like, that everybody has part of, and everybody has a part.
Right.
That makes it even more sad.
Oh, and I see like within one question. You saying that there's multiple. Yeah.
Read me.
oh no.
Other,
Okay.
those questions you made.
I think I have something for this.
It was very hard.
Hold on, let me write this down.
Something too hard, so I can start imagining yourself writing the question. So they should just
Wow, I can't read that. What is that? What is
Create a meme and then the phrase that goes one picture, screen this, and sketch it immediately. It's basically, some guy saying, nah, I don't want to deal with that. The other one said, now that's something I can agree with.
I'm just trying to read the small print.
That's
Oh, it's
from-
money. No, I was. Oh, it's money. I was trying to read with the small print next to drink.
Is the money picture part of that meme relevant, or is basically just a reference you're doing with that?
It's just an example of a meme that, so like, he's like, he doesn't want $10 plus $2.39 shipping. But he wants $12.39 free shipping. He's on board with that one.
Yeah.
Where, I think there's something I think we can do with the art meme is kind of like, we don't know how to do it.
Babies.
Maybe,
Number 3,
I don't know.
yeah, so a chapter 15 question, which is false? Chaucer was an author. Decameron has 150 stories.
Oh. Wait.
And have it be answerable. You don't have to answer it. But no. I'll let it go.
No.
Like, when you could answer. I'll take it tricky for you, okay?
It's fully grown.
the third one.
That's all.
Chronological order, yeah, so like, in order.
That's what I can think of.
Chaucer writes Canterbury Tales. So Jesus. And they keep the four things in that heaven order. Series 9.
I mean,
How many use that?
maybe we can just.
I thought there was something about art we can do, but it's not come out.
There was one that has- This could be like I can't remember the, I can't say it. Hypocrite? Hypocrism? Whatever. Basically two things contrasting each other. I mean, she talks a lot about.
Honestly, it sounds weird, but for some reason I can't even like the plague doctor from ST. He for the no, and then the strolling plague doctor meme as well.
No! What meme do you want? I like mine. What else was mine? What I had? So women, full grown women going to war. Little boys going to war. Yeah. No.
I don't even go on my own.
That's the best one I got.
I remember like there wasn't there something about realism artwork that could also be useful, but I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, we don't have much time. We about do y'all just want to go with mine?
I guess. Sure.
Or what's the next one?
Invent 3 questions, chapter for the questions that take the following forms, which is definitely think we should probably do like for the true and false, we should keep the things in kind of like similar categories.
So, wait, is there 3? Oh, okay. So, what?
This provides chronological.
One thing,
Jesus died in 2024.
Grandiose Madonna's angels on all above, side, from sides and below throne.
Is that true?
Nope.
So, angels are where?
In Grandiose Madonna's throne, angels are along the top, sides, and bottom of the throne. Yep.
Angels. I mean, this is a really easy false question. So one false question.
False statements.
Joan of Arc is a male. Beautiful. I'm done.
We probably, and actually, like, we need like one, which is false. We need 3 true statements in that one.
Yeah, 3 truths and, just 3 questions in general? Oh, I thought you had to create 3 for each section.
Well, we have 3 questions, that's right, but 3 in formats, but the first one has to be like 3 of them false, 1 of them true.
Oh, 3 truths, well, no, 2 truths and a lie? So 2, what?
Okay, for 1, I put down 1 false one.
Okay,
So we need 3 true ones.
or I think it's just 3 questions in general, so if you have 2 lies and a truth.
No, which is false for number 1, so we need 3 truths, 1 lie. And the other one for 2 needs 1 true, 3 lies.
Oh, what? That's so confusing. Okay, so. So it's false and true, so it's so confusing, okay.
So I put one that's a false one.
So that's the false, so everything else is true. Okay, I got it, I got it. Okay, well, I mean, let's just break them out.
In true, or which might be on number one, how about Getula's limitations, page 80, has transformed our traditional absurd of passions of Christ.
That is way too much. Here, let's just. No, like, simple say that. Like, and figure, like, you can still do that eight and be like, Jesus is dead.
Or like, Joan of Arc was declared martyr.
Okay, Jesus is dead.
Of the three ladies that, I can't pronounce her very well.
The three ladies, that she entered that, what's her name?
It's pretty good. Basically, that all of a sudden, still don't get to the Christine. I cannot speak very well. with this.
Christine interview.
Are reasons restitute injustice.
Okay, now. Okay, now we gotta figure out one true and then three false. So, and we can just make really obvious false. There are no skeletons in your 15.5.
John of Arc's death had not cost influence of another person's fallen to heritage. That's a random trivia, I know, but there's I remember looking at some sources of John of Arc and how it relates to another noble named the Skillus Saray.
Stones of death, black death does not exist.
Where the Black Death was the name of a trading ship during the time.
It's a ship. Okay. We need a lie and a truth. Okay, give me some really funny, give me a funny lie. Very happy that his son died. 15.
You said you wanted a funny lie. So
That's a funny lie.
Realism art had no religious influence whatsoever.
Oh, wait, okay. Yeah. Okay, hold on, wait. So art.
In new realism had no religious influence.
3 minutes.
Okay, guys, give me a truth. Have no religious undertone. Give me just an obvious one, an obvious truth.
The Lindbergh brothers painted
Oh,
the February plate.
brothers painted.
12 plates of the castle for each month.
A book of hours.
Mm,
Okay, now what's the last one?
But these event project will like the order
Okay.
we already have some.
Oh, okay.
So the question is, which one of these events came first?
I thought it was like to put these events in the correct chronological order.
I mean, there are some.
So which of these ones, so it has to
Which
be.
one came first, which one was last? It's kind of the same thing, just different wording.
So, yeah, well, wait, no, this one is first. He's supposed to be in third. Right?
It said don't answer.
Don't answer?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but it would already be in the order, I think. Oh, okay.
So the 100 Years' War.
Yeah, 100 Years War. Then what's
Black Death.
yeah, Black Death, and then it'll be the.
Great Schism.
I thought Straight Schism.
It was
Was it before?
they were doing it out of order, so we're not doing it in order. And
Oh,
what was it called?
We. Okay, we're done. That was totally the whole time. Is it bad that I'm very laughing when her son's math funny? Is that a bad thing? Should be scared.
Honestly, it's not like the weirdest concerning, like, thing I see, like. I mean, I made a connection between Joan of Arc's step and how us like a nerd noble goes to Ray to basically go insane trying to prove God exists, like the main atrocious deeds of mankind. To be fair, I only learned about this like a game that uses all of human history, took him as subject matter and showed two paralyzing forms of him. The knight that served alongside him and trusted her a lot and idolized her. And the same person idolized her, but it's gone completely crazy. Because to her, or to him, Jeanne of Arc was a symbol of God, and the fact that she died in stake such a way without God's divine interference shook his belief in God. Though for the sake of some of your own sanity, do not look into some of the things he did. It is bad.
Yeah, I can't. I have a weakness for seeing that or even reading about it. All right, 3 minutes are up. Someone was shaking his head like, no, they're not up. 3 minutes are not up. We'll keep it light. But we have to move on. So the major painter of this chapter is Giotto di Bondone, but he's just known in the history as Giotto. Giotto. So he studied under Cimabue. So Cimabue is shown on the left there. Actually, that black and white you can't really see very well. In the museum that I was referring to earlier, where Boccaccio's statue is outside, this is in one of the rooms. You have two pictures of Mary holding the infant Jesus, and the one on the right is Cimabue's. The one on the left is an artist that I don't believe is in our book. I think his name is Duccio, but Cimabue's over here. Wait a minute. That's not right. That's Giotto there. Yeah, so
So both the versions of the Virgin Mary as like the mother are side by side.
yes, and these would be altar pieces that would be put in churches probably around the nativity time, like December, the Advent season. And Cimabue was the teacher of Giotto. As the young man Giotto comes into his own, he really emphasizes the humanity of the religious figures. You would think that saints always have like skinny legs, and that gravity does not act on them, or that light doesn't hit them prior to Giotto. But he gives light and shadow. Look, you can see Mary's knees coming out. That gives a sense of depth. On her shirt, the shading allows you to feel like she's got volume. She's got three-dimensionality. The angels, yes, they are going up as they are behind one another, but it's a little closer. And then this staircase with the angels dealing down gives a further sense that there's height, width, and depth. But we call this descriptive naturalism. That's his style, descriptive naturalism, even for otherworldly subjects. This is the throne in heaven, and Giotto paints it with descriptive naturalism. So when he was alive, he painted probably, they think he painted some St. Francis pictures. Remember St. Francis preaching to the birds? We saw that in a previous chapter. Later, he painted the Arena Chapel in Padua, Italy. scenes of the life of Christ and the life of the Virgin Mary go along the walls of this chapel, paid for, bankrolled by a rich moneylender. And this blue was from, did you ever play Minecraft? Like, I think it's called lapis lazuli. Like, can't you, like, isn't that part of Minecraft? Yeah, people are very excited about that. This was very expensive, and sometimes in history more expensive than gold, and it would be ground up and put into wet plaster, and it would dry into the color. It's called the fresco technique. And before we look at a specific picture, note also how these arches want to push outward. So instead of like buttresses on the outside, there's these poles that keep it from going out. So that's a little interesting, isn't it? All right, here is a picture from the scene of the life of Christ and his mother. And it's known to history as the Pietà. Pietà means lamentation over the body of Christ. So maybe you picked a sad person out of this picture. I mean, they're all displaying grief in their own way. He's been laid down into the arms of his mother, that's Mary. And Mary Magdalene is holding his feet. Anyone know why that would be significant? Remember we talked about Judas. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I wasn't going on that path, but wasn't there another picture where, he was like cleaning his feet, or was it his actual mother? But who was the one that was doing the feet cleaning in the picture I'm talking about? Was it Magdalene or mom? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it's a clean.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
the same idea, like washing of the feet is like a metaphor in the Bible. It's like, even though Jesus is like the savior, he would still wash the feet of his friends, and like he's no better than the common man.
I thought, I was thinking that it was his actual mother who was doing the feet cleaning, so that's why I thought that the second Mary was like taking her place and she couldn't do it.
Oh,
That's where I was gonna go with it, but
yeah. Well, there's 3 Marys in the Bible, and this is definitely a different one. But you're actually right that the fragrances and the cleaning was done. Remember, that's what got Judas so upset. He was like, this money could have been given to the poor, and he ended up betraying Jesus. We talked about this with Dante's Inferno. So it's symbolic that she's holding the feet. Now, usually you don't see figures with their backs turned to us in painting. It's very rare. And I hate that about pictures. Like go on, like, I don't know if it's Lake State's website. It's definitely an improved website, but whenever you see someone from behind, like walking upstairs, it's just not good form for a picture. You're like, oh, it's not bad. Well, it's better to see someone from the face, preferably when they are knowing that the picture's coming. But anyway, the reason they're here is it draws us into the picture. This is not the center of the fresco, it's the lower left. But these figures frame this intimate reaction between Jesus and her deceased son as she's holding him. Over here is St. John. He's the youngest apostle, and he's like really can't believe it. And everyone shows grief in different ways. St. Peter, stiff upper lip, very stoic, in control of his emotions. The angels, who I wouldn't think like would show emotion like this, they are, I was gonna say they're going batty, but they're not bats, they're angels. They're very emotional. I could just hear them going, just with sadness, kind of like when a 2-year-old gets hurt and there's that second before they actually make the full noise. You're like, wait for it. Ah! I love that pause. Even the tree is showing grief. The tree looks like it's seen better days, livelier days. It's dead, I guess, but then you zoom in and you see that there's some new growth on the tree. Maybe it's in like the Good Friday, the death, that like there's like the seed of promise and hope of resurrection, rebirth. And look how Giotto shows the landscape. It's still like very much about the human drama of the scene, but his buildings and hills and trees, they look closer to what they would be. He's getting closer to the right proportions. He's not fully there yet, but he's a very influential artist on the trajectory to like showing nature and human emotion as very realistic. So this was, I don't know that raw chicken is served, but if so, this angel's pretty upset about that. So Jojo, was, the story is that he was a shepherd boy, like drawing on a rock, and Shimabui walked by him and was like, "Wow, kid, you're good," and then like took him away to train him in painting. And actually, we have time to watch this. You got to see some of this for yourself, and how they grind up the frescoes. Oh, that's not the one. Who knows what this website is? It's gonna give me a virus worse than the Black Death. Actually, you should have corrected me there. The Black Death was not a virus. It was bacterial. Come on.
I was waiting for you to catch that.
Do you believe him? Yeah, I do too. I think he knew that. All right, so Giotto, Arena Chapel, Padua, Italy. Enjoy. Yeah, what is that? I queued that up perfectly.
Work on the image quickly as it dried. This allowed for much richer colors and was more durable.
So they grind up the pigment and then they put on this wet plaster.
Giotto's big opportunity to use this technique came in 1303, when he was summoned to Padua to decorate the small family chapel of a wealthy businessman. It was a commission which would establish Giotto's reputation over the next 7 centuries. Here in the Arena Chapel in Padua are some of the most spectacular images ever painted. Incontrovertibly by Giotto, they're an extraordinarily ambitious cycle of 38 frescoes, which run around the entire interior of the building. At the top are scenes from the life of the Virgin and her parents, Joachim and Anne, and below them are scenes from Christ's life and death. Giotto's emphasis is on storytelling. His paintings are human dramas. His settings have a believable feel. Here is one of the most dramatic moments of the Gospel. It shows the split second after Judas has betrayed Christ with a kiss. Soldiers have already surrounded Christ, and amidst the chaos, Giotto's brilliant composition focuses all our attention on the central image of 2 men embracing. But what Giotto does is imbue the figure of Christ with a real sense of emotion, a real sense of passion. There's a panel just to the right of the crucifixion where Christ lies in the arms of his mother. He's dead. His mother has a sense of real loss on her face. Likewise, the figures that surround it convey a real sense of drama. And suddenly it becomes clear that raw emotion and the real essence of a story in the Bible can be brought to life through painting. But he does that most sensationally of all on the final image, the image that confronts us when we leave the chapel on the west wall.
The Last Judgment, which we don't have time for, fool. All right, so these are side by side, master and student, Shimabui and Doto, Agni Santi. Agni means all of the or every, and Santi like Santa Croce, like holy or saint. So this is all the saints. That's what that means in Italian, Agni Santi. And we see his descriptive rationalistic technique here and Christ knowing all things in the left. Now, some of you probably picked this as a sad picture. Lots of sadness here. Mary holding the deceased Jesus. It's black and white in your book, but I thought you deserved color. And that's the same scene that Giotto has painted in his Pietà, like Mary holding the dead Christ. But this is what we call very expressive. I mean, this is just look at that wound in his side. Look at his hands, his feet. It's very hard to look at. But these were made like by the hundreds in the 1300s. It was such a popular devotional image sculpture that was made, especially in northern churches. This one was made in present day Germany. And we don't know who made it. It's by someone anonymous. That's not their name. We just don't know. Other sculpture from the time period has the Well of Moses. This is at a ducal burial place in Dijon, France. Moses is the most famous figure on the Well of Moses. Above it was going to be, well, it actually was like above these Old Testament figures was going to be a life-size crucifixion group, Jesus and the people at the foot of the cross. But during the French Revolution, revolutionaries, they grabbed it and they smashed it all, and just fragments of it remain. But they couldn't smash you, Moses. He just talked to me. Just notice the horns on his head. Does anyone catch in the book why he has horns on his head? Saint Jerome translated the Bible from Greek and Hebrew. This would have been in Hebrew into Latin, and he mistranslated like beams as like horns. So he like gave substance to like light emanating from his head. So it looks like he has horns. So many depictions till they straightened out this mistranslation were shown Moses with horns. My favorite aspect is the split beard. I think that's just classic. This was originally painted, and so super realistic. So I would say this is realistic and this is expressive. Want to know the difference between those two words? We're almost done here, so hang in there. Betrayal and Annunciation are in this book of ours. It's a different book of ours than the Limborg brothers. You don't have to remember this artist, but I would like it that if you could see an image like this, especially after watching the Giotto video where Judas and Christ are embracing at the center, that this is the betrayal when Judas betrays Christ with a kiss. And then on the right is the Annunciation. We've seen many of these in this course. The angel, Gabriel, kneels down, and Mary, with her halo, is receiving the message, blessed are you among women, and she's holding a book, which you know as the prophet Isaiah. So the last section of this chapter is music and then Madonna del Latte. So what we heard while you were working is Guillaume Machot. And he was a French composer, and he moved the art of composition and songwriting into what's called the Ars Nova, the new art. And specifically, what he contributed were these ideas of isorhythms. I'm not a musicologist, but there are so many like rhythms that you can have, like quarter notes, dotted half notes, eighth notes. And if you put together like silly, right? That's a rhythm. And then isorhythm would introduce that rhythm in other parts of the song, maybe every fourth measure. And then you could go. And then wait, and then. And so like every 4 measures, and then in other measures, you would do it maybe every 8 measures. And every once in a while, it would line up. Like, blinking like turn signals on streets when, so every so often they lock up again and then they detract. That's what isorhythm does. And it's a repetition of these patterns according to like an algorithm, and then they line up to each other. And then the notes would be different in different rhythms. So he does that throughout his Mass of Notre Dame, which is what we heard at the break. So I'm not going to play it now, but you can go home, put it in your Spotify playlist, and you can listen for the rhythmic style and the appearance of syncopation. Syncopation is a beat that is unexpected. It's not like one or 3, 2 or 4. It's usually like an and that just comes out of nowhere, you think, and it keeps interest, keeps the song moving along. And this picture is called Madonna del Latte. You're never going to order the Starbucks latte in the same way. But we know why it's called Madonna of the Milk, because she is feeding the baby Jesus milk. And this is a traditional sign in Catholic iconography of charity. A mother nursing a child, but especially the Virgin nursing Jesus. It's a sign of charity. Somebody needs something, I have what they need, and I'm giving it freely. That's charity. And Jesus looks pretty like he's growing pretty well. I think he'd be in the 90th percentile of charts if he went to a pediatric doctor. So that's this chapter. I thought it was going to take longer, but it didn't. Do we have any questions? No? Okay, one last thing. Before you head in your seats, if you don't want me to photocopy this for like a review sheet or something, I might end up scanning them and like sending them out to everyone if they scan right. But if you don't want that, I respect that. Just put D, like meaning don't. I'm not proud of this. I don't want my name out there. But if you don't mind it being part of a PDF that I send out, just do nothing on it and maybe you'll see it again in digital form. So bye. See you in a few days. Thanks.
This is not.
Yeah, thank you. You doing okay? Yeah. All right, me too.